Run! Tell all the other curs the law's coming! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Thanks for choosing to spend time with me today. Folks, I realize how valuable your time is. And I hope that once everything is said and done, you feel like you've gotten your money's worth in terms of time invested. Apologies for yesterday's show going out late. It was all ready to go and queued up as usual. But at some point, I clicked when I should have clacked or whatever. And it didn't end up going out at 2 a.m. It ended up going out much later in the day. I'll try not to do that again. Hopefully you're listening to this at the usual time. I suppose I should follow up my horrible frustration with the brokerage whose name I shall not speak, relating to the friend who was trying to get out of that brokerage to go to another one, and all the complaints are still valid. I mean, the stuff that this person initially went through was as bad as I said it was. However, someone higher up the chain reached out to me and was very cooperative in terms of taking the more efficient route to achieving the goal of this person. So good. And my interactions with that person were good. So I suppose I needed to give credit where it was due. And it was refreshing to finally have someone who would focus on a solution that actually gets someone where they want to go, rather than throwing up imaginary blocks and sort of deceiving people into thinking that this makes more sense than that when it doesn't, or implying that certain things needed to happen when they didn't. So anyway, I thought I'd put that out there. It's refreshing. A day late, a dollar short, but there it is. So I guess we can draw some level of comfort from that. Today, we are going to talk about, first, just more wood for the fire, I guess, on this whole mortgage applications versus interest rate versus setting expectations on what people are going to do or not going to do based on those numbers. The headline comes to us from CNBC, and it's not the only outlet that was going with this. There were a huge number of them. And you would think after a certain amount of time of continually rolling out the same headline that seems so contradictory to them, that they would come up with some maybe more exploration of why things are happening the way they're happening. Now, sadly, a whole bunch of people who apparently seem in a position to make policies based on these kinds of headlines assume that the correct conclusion to come to is we need to loan more money. So the headline that we get here is mortgage applications drop 1.8% despite lowest interest rates since November. And nowhere in this article is inventory mentioned at all. Not in the first paragraph, not in the last paragraph, not on any paragraph in between. And it's just mind-boggling. It would seem that if you were going to report on something like this and put it out there like this gigantic thing, that you might spend a minute contemplating what the angles are on that story. But it gives some interesting stats that I thought would be fun to share with you today. As it mentions in the headline, total mortgage applications decreased last week by 1.8% from the previous week. So that was a week-to-week drop. But the total volume is down 23.5% from the same week last year. So nearly a quarter drop from the same time last year. Do not take that as a lack of buyer interest. Do not take that as anything relating to money or interest rates or anything else. This idiotic assumption that if interest rates go down, we should be seeing this huge jump in buying is moronic when you don't understand that a market is is a two-factor equation. It's I have money to buy a thing, and there need to be the things. And they're just completely continuing to ignore the things part. And again, I'm beating up CNBC, but I'm seeing this on NBC. I'm seeing this on CBS. I'm seeing this in CNN. I'm seeing this everywhere. We get some voices now. I'm constantly trying to amplify the voices that come out and say, yeah, you know what? It's an inventory problem. Some of them are latecomers to the party, like we've talked about over the last couple of weeks with articles from outlets. There's even Housing Wire has even taken both sides of this particular one in different articles that they've released, where they seem completely ignorant of the idea that it's an inventory problem and just tout how much we need more lending and more aggressive reaching out to folks who are subprime borrowers and all of this stuff to make these deals happen, when that's not the solution to the problem. That's actually the fuel for the fire that is the problem. But with a 25% dip in the number of folks getting loans, that is a ridiculous indicator. But once you look beyond the headline to just how tough inventory is out there in so many different areas. What's bizarre is I'm seeing some interesting pockets in my local marketplace where there's tons of inventory. The area that I am currently searching in, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I'm seeing an awful lot of inventory. Now, granted, the prices are a little bit more bloated, but what's interesting is in some areas, I'm actually seeing a trend a little bit downward. And remember, we talked about in my marketplace the $1.3 million barrier that I mentioned that was up a few years ago, or was it 1.2? I can't recall. But in any event, just things wouldn't sell above that price. And once things got below that price, they'd tend to go really quickly. Well, I'm starting to see that as a event here, but the barrier seems to be right around $1 million. And again, these are all things you can identify in your local marketplaces if you simply take a graph and plot out the number of properties that have sold, say, over the last 3 months, with graphs showing the numbers of properties closed at different price brackets, right? And particularly then you want to plot that against listing price versus sales price, because that's going to give you an idea of how much of a discount people were taking in these different brackets. So feel free to reach out to your real estate professional to get those numbers. Those are relatively easy to generate. Some of them, you can't mux them together into the same graph. But if you even are a basic level Mojo worker in something like Numbers on the Mac or the Microsoft equivalent, you can make stuff happen that way. That'll give you a nice graphical representation of what you're looking at that can oftentimes make the data easier to understand. But the point here is that these numbers don't tell us a money problem. These numbers continue to reveal an inventory problem, which continues to pump up prices. And that's really my main concern here, because as we've talked about over the last few months, one of the things that we're trying to focus on as a primary motivator of a potential problem is overall debt structure. Right? How much what did I call it? I was trying to come up with some cool term for it. Did I call it the debt template or the debt load, I guess, per person? And we've talked about things like student loans, which are really on the shoulders of so many millennials that are supposed to be our primary big chunk of the market, right? For 2017, that's what a lot of folks have been saying. Car loans. Remember, when we talked about the student loan situation, we're actually seeing a bigger bubble of student loan debt right now than we did mortgage debt at the peak. At the peak, it was 1.3 trillion. Student loan debt is 1.31 trillion. And I think psychologically, it's a completely different perception of that debt. We've already talked about how half the people who have student loans think it's going to be forgiven. We also saw how just under 50% over the last 8 years, since graduating 8 years ago, have made zero payments on their loans when they were supposed to be making payments the next year. So there's 7 years without making payments when they should. So there's a lot more of a general, maybe broader is a better word, a broader perception on the part of these folks who are burdened with this debt that they don't need to do anything with it. As compared to folks, when you take on a mortgage, there doesn't seem to be this perception that their mortgage will just get forgiven, right? So, this perception of what's going on with debt and when things start to get tough, how do we react? How do we prioritize our debt? I really think needs to be at the top of our list of things to watch out for if we're trying to figure out where this market's going to go and where we might see a big pivot point that turns us into a market where things really start to drop. All right, so back onto the subject of mortgage applications here. According to Mike, what is up with these people who are economists who have these unpronounceable last names? Aren't there any Smiths out there that are economists? I really want to talk to one. Mike Fratantoni. I'm totally Fratantoni. I give up. MBA chief economist. And I'm sure that stands for Mortgage Bankers Association. Quote, mortgage rates dropped to their lowest level since November of 2016 as geopolitical tensions continue to rise. Rates are still too high to attract much interest from homeowners looking to refinance, and purchase activity was relatively weak. Isn't that idiotic? He talks about it being at its lowest level since November of 2016, but also then goes on to say that they're too high to attract much interest from homeowners looking to refinance, which may be true, but completely glosses over the fact that this is super attractive for buyers. So maybe I need to cut him some slack. That's the only quote they give this guy. So he may have said more in relation to that would indicate he understood that this was still great rates for people who are looking to buy. Applications to purchase a home fell 3% from the previous week and 1% from a year ago. Refinance applications increased only slightly by 0.2% from a week ago, but are down 41.5% from last year. Refinance applications increased to 42.4% of total applications, up from 41.6% the previous week. In sort of a nod to their expectations, the folks at the Mortgage Bankers Association did say, we do expect a pickup in purchase activity through the remainder of the spring season. With a strong job market and signs of continuing economic growth, we are forecasting roughly 9% growth in purchase origination volume for 2017 relative to 2016. Now, in order for that to happen, a lot more people who already own a home are going to have to decide to sell it, and a lot of builders are going to have to finish homes for folks to buy, because we're just not seeing a lot of that kind of growth. Now, there's good indicators. We should see something. I think it's going to be uneven terrain across the country, as I mentioned yesterday. California still has a lot of burdens and blocks in terms of developers getting homes built, but I think a lot of other areas are going to see a more robust set of builders going out there, getting stuff built, making some money on it, and then that inspiring buyers to jump in and check out the water for themselves. So what do we take from that? Well, I think this is one of those situations where you need to get a little bit more aggressive. If you're looking for deals, right? The reality of the market right now is it's ridiculously competitive. But, just like they say, gold is where you find it, so are deals. Are they harder to find now? Absolutely. Long gone are the days in most marketplaces where I could sit down at my computer, pick just about any area that I was interested in, and after doing a little bit of searching, finding a property that ended up being positive cash flow right out of the gate. And by right out of the gate, I mean assuming I was going to pay full asking price for the property. I actually did that on this show a few times, where I would just sort of walk through the process and say, hey, you know what? Right off the gate, this house is positive cash flow if I pay full price for it. And even in those days, I can remember ones that have been on the market for 60 to 90 days, and the idea that I'd pay full asking price for a home that had been on the market that long was a little bit ridiculous. So those days are very thin on the ground. I don't think any house that would simply be buy it and rent it immediately is going to fit that bill today. Unless you pay all cash, of course, right? I mean, this is assuming that you're going to get a relatively conventional loan. You're going to put down your 20%. You're going to get an 80% loan. That's the assumptions that we run on typically, right? And at that investment level, normally you're not going to be getting the return that you need to be positive cash flow. And in addition to that, as I've said before, you need to calculate based on this idea that you're at the peak and that there's enough of a probability that in future months and future years, you're not going to be able to see any growth in your rents. So if you're counting on that, I suggest that you not. Okay, so on the subject of getting aggressive, the other thing I wanted to cover today was 3 ways to find motivated sellers. Some a little bit less conventional than others, but these are 3 things that come to us from the folks at Bigger Pockets. I thought we'd cover those and then maybe throw around a few ideas of my own that I've gone with in the past to kind of be a force multiplier on that so that you could maybe find deals a little bit easier than if you just went with these 3 suggestions. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. Today's show really kind of focusing on, first, just really backing up the claim we've been talking about what the level of difficulty is in terms of the marketplace, where the difficulty is coming from, and as we discussed at the beginning of the show, how some of the most popular outlets just don't seem to get it. They still want to talk about the financial side of it. It seems like that argument should be abandoned at this point, and everybody should be towing the line of we need more listings. Whether that is brand new construction or existing construction, I do not care, but I can't control whether or not a seller sells their home or a homeowner decides to sell their home. The only thing that you can theoretically control is creating an environment in which builders will build, and that's kind of where we're at. But the challenges that are presented by that is that if you're an investor and you want to get in and get going now, it may seem challenging. And given a lot of the discussions we've had here, you may be thinking maybe this isn't the right time to do this. But I'm going to argue that any time is a good time as long as you do it right, as long as you approach it right, as long as your strategy fits for what's going on in that market. And as I've mentioned before, you make your money when you buy a property, right? It's because you're setting the stage for what you're going to have to survive through. You're determining how much money you're going to have to be putting out every month to maintain and sustain that property, and you need to do that in a way that makes sense, that's going to fit with the realities of what it costs to work with that property and then what you can rent it for. So it's always best to have those things figured out before you've ever made that offer. But the first and most difficult task right now is just finding those properties. So you have to kind of go unconventional. And if there's one thing I love about the world of real estate, it's coming up with ways to get what you want and doing it in a way that's unconventional, that doesn't follow every other rat in the maze. Because when you follow all the other rats in the maze, all you end up is sniffing the butt of the rat in front of you. So don't do that. Let's see if we can't get to the cheese first, or maybe we can find ourselves a better way to a bigger chunk of cheese. And so one of the first things I like to suggest, and this is not on the list from Bigger Pockets, one of the things I like to suggest is not necessarily partnering with a real estate professional. I know that I'm a licensed real estate guy, so I can go in and have relationships with folks at title companies where they will help me out in terms of doing searches to find properties that are not owner occupied. And it's an easy search to do. You simply go in there and you look for, you search for properties in a certain area, and you flag all of the properties where the mailing address is different than the address of the property. Odds are that is a investment property. I find that in the past, folks who have had properties as investments for longer are oftentimes more willing to sell at a more aggressive price. Brand spanking new purchases, so folks who bought within the last year or within the last 2 years, maybe not so much, but folks who have held those properties for a super long time. Or you completely forego the part about the discrepancy between physical address and mailing address, and you simply go with properties that have not had a change in ownership in over 10 years. That is another great way to go. Now, while you can get that stuff from a title company, my feeling is I've never approached them as a not real estate guy. They like to work with me and do things with me because they figure if they do that, when I get into a transaction, I'll have my transactions with their escrow company. So that may be a factor that limits your ability to do it if you're not a real estate person. However, you can do just about the same thing with various online sources for this stuff. I know whenever I go in and I'm doing a direct mail piece, and I haven't done one in a couple of years, so I can't imagine the system is less robust than it was then. But if you go to the U.S. Postal Service, you can actually enter all kinds of criteria. You can enter things relating to how long ago the home was purchased, the things relating to address, mailing address being different from physical address. They have all kinds of demographic information like household income, all kinds of different stuff. So you can absolutely filter this down into, and then of course mix that with the homes themselves, how many bedrooms and baths and that kind of stuff. And use those as a way to reach out directly to folks that you want to buy from. Now, what's great about this strategy is if you are a buyer who wants to buy as an investment, absolutely works for you. If you're a buyer who wants to buy to find your next home, also works for you. In fact, it may work for you better. You just create a letter for these folks. You let them know what your situation is. I'm a buyer who's interested in living in this community. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a professional real estate investor. I'm just another person who's looking for a house. And I would, if you're interested in potentially selling your home, I would love to talk to you about it. And there you go. You're not going to want to send out 10 of these. You're not going to want to send out 20. You're going to want to send out hundreds if you're going to hope to get any kind of response. So do whatever filtering you're going to do and broaden your umbrella. In fact, you could cover an entire city. You could simply say to the post office, I want everything in 95037, which is the zip code here in Morgan Hill. And you could say, and put in the criteria we just talked about. If you wanted to focus on only the folks who've lived in their homes for more than 10 years or whatever else, you could manage all that and jump through and make sure you're getting addresses that are very focused just on the stuff that you want to direct at, that you want to direct your mailer at. And I'm also going to suggest that you tailor whatever email piece you send to them based on your criteria. So if you're only going for folks that have been in their homes for a really long time, you can guess what the layout of that person's life is a little bit, right? You might be able to get an in with them in a opening letter that is going to work for you. For instance, over 10 years, you could say, you could say things relating to, I want a home where I feel like I can raise my family, and the neighborhood and home in your area is exactly what I'm looking for, because odds are that's their shared experience, right? If they've been in that house that long, if it's a 3 or 4 bedroom home, for instance, if it fits that model, the odds are that's probably what's going on. These are probably folks who've raised a family in that home. And they may just be ready to downsize. They may be at that point in life where they're looking to move to Phoenix or wherever else and start retirement or downsize because the kids have moved out. That's a great way to go. I've had folks who have great success with that in the past. That's a technique I actually used pretty frequently when I was trying to help investors locate properties about 15 years ago. So let it be something that works for you, whether you're an investor or someone just looking to buy your own home. Now, the great news is you can go and do stuff like that, and oftentimes you can negotiate yourself a great deal that no one else is going to get, because if you do it that way, there's no real estate people involved. So there's no X% that needs to go out as a commission. So that's stuff that you and the seller can split, something I strongly suggest you mention in your letter. Now let's go ahead and jump in and talk about their suggestions. Now, their number one suggestion here is the for sale by owner sites. Totally agree that you should hit the for sale by owner sites. However, I also suggest that you do sites like Zillow and ping the people who are doing the make me move deal. or anyone else that's doing that kind of stuff on any other site. As I mentioned, I'm doing that, and I was surprised to find that only 2 real people reached out to me, and all the rest were real estate agents. And I continue to get pinged. I think we're now up to, the last time we talked, I think I was up to 17. As of today, I'm keeping track now. We are at 21. I have had a grand total of 21 contacts from agents, all of them lying to me about why they want to contact me, except for one. So 20 lies and 1 truth teller in terms of licensed real estate folks who have reached out to me so far on my Make Me Move entry on Zillow. Okay, so according to the good folks over at Bigger Pockets, jump on fsbo.com and cold call people. That's their suggestion. Tell them you care. Tell them you've priced their property wrong, or they've priced their property wrong. Now, of course, this is advice that's going out to real estate people. I'm going to suggest that this is easily a great way for you as a buyer to go. This won't be, I think, as potentially lucrative as the direct mail thing. We're already seeing through other articles I've covered on this show that there's a disconnect between owners' perceptions of their home's value and its actual value. In other words, homes are appraising for less than sellers think they should. So, and that's a change that's happened over about the last 4 months, which is kind of interesting and unfortunately works against buyers, because when you first encounter them, particularly in a for sale by owner scenario, they are likely going to have a bloated opinion of what their home is worth. And now also remember that a lot of these folks are expressing what they think their property is worth based on their comparisons of other properties that have sold. However, they're not taking into account, for the most part, the fact that there were commissions involved in those other sales. So some folks are savvy enough to get that, and some folks actually aggressively price, and as part of the pitch for their for sale by owner property will say, come over here, save money because we're not going to be doing a commission. But most of them don't. Most of them think if the house next door sold for $1 million, their home should sell for $1 million, even if the home next door had to pay a 6% commission to real estate agents. Whereas in reality, you should be able to enjoy a 6% discount off of that $1 million price, because that's not getting paid. And full 6%. You shouldn't just get half, because the seller pays the commission. So that would be a full 6% off of the price you would expect to pay at that price point. Okay. Craigslist is another great source. I'm becoming more and more of a convert to Craigslist. Now, I mentioned I'm staging my home for sale, and some of that is the casual stuff we've talked about in terms of changing light bulbs, paintings, changing fixtures, those types of things, but also the big stuff, the remodeling of the kitchen, the remodeling of the master bathroom. Those are all things that are going on, and in doing all of that, I have gotten rid of a ton of stuff. Well, at some point, I decided some of the stuff I should just get rid of on Craigslist. So I started doing that, and I've actually been able to sell an awful lot of things on Craigslist. And I haven't had a problem yet. I know there's occasional Craigslist horror stories. I haven't seen them. Not only have I been able to get moving boxes for free, let me suggest you do that, but I've also been able to sell quite a few things for a halfway decent price with no stress at all. People show up with the cash, they buy it, they put it in their car, they drive away, deal done. And I have not had anything weird happen yet. However, I will say that I am very anal retentive about setting these deals up so that the likelihood of shenanigans is very low. So for instance, I mentioned that I am renting a storage unit. Anything I'm going to sell goes to the storage unit. And for Craigslist, I give them the address of the storage facility, and I tell them, you'll have to meet me there. We have to go through a secured gate. You'll go through that, and then we'll load you up, and then we'll leave. So they can only get into the facility with me entering a code for them to get in. They can only leave the facility with me giving them a code to get in, and everybody gets photographed and videotaped when they enter and when they exit and all over the premises. So if anything hinky did happen, I'm pretty well covered. For my money, that is the absolute best kind of place to conduct a transaction like that. So let me suggest you figure out something similar. I think the general rules are you at least want to make sure it's in a super public place, that kind of thing. But again, I haven't even had a hint of concern there. All right, so number 2 on their list is a direct mail campaign, which obviously we just talked about that. You send yellow letters to absentee homeowners because the likelihood of these guys wanting to sell is very high. Why? Because it's virtually impossible to successfully manage your own real estate out of state or country. Well, I don't agree with that entirely. I do agree that by and large, what you end up finding is that those types of homeowners are the ones most likely to be wanting to sell. So that's another category you could search for based on what we talked about before. You could go through there, and then once you've gotten the list of discrepancies between the physical address and the mailing address, pick the folks with the mailing address that's furthest away from the property itself. So if you've got a property in California, let's say it's San Jose, California, and you have a mailing address that's in Los Angeles, California, or any other state, those are going to be your primo options. Now, here's the other part of it, and this kind of relates to direct mail, but it's another way to go. I'm a strong believer in driving areas you're interested in. Ground truth is a miraculous thing. So what you need to do is drive areas you're interested in, find homes that look vacant or look completely neglected in terms of their front yards. If you're seeing no signs of life and a completely neglected front yard, jot down that address and send an email, or not an email, send a letter off to those folks. See what information you can find out about that address. You may be able to consult with county records, see if there is a different mailing address for that particular property. If you can't find that information out, and you probably can, do a little Google searching will get you a long way. You can probably connect with your preferred real estate professional, and they should have access to the records online. I know that in my case, I can enter just about any address, and I can get an awful lot of data about it. I can get the names of the owners. I can find out what the mailing address is, if it's different from the physical address. But again, that's all part of public tax records that you should be able to find out at the county anyway. And ping those as well. There have been plenty of times where, again, this isn't something I've done recently, but in the past, this is a technique that's actually worked a couple of times. Don't look for it working 10, 20, 30% of the time. It may just be 5% of the time. But man, sometimes the deals you can put together doing things that way can be ridiculously lucrative. All right, number 3 on their list. And again, this seems to be aimed more towards, folks who are in real estate, but you can get access to this tool as well. And they say for real estate investors, utilize the multiple listing service. Now, in your case, if you're an investor who's not licensed, or if you're just a buyer who wants to buy, that just means getting into a relationship with a real estate professional who's going to set up a search for you. This is super easy to do. It's something that takes them minutes. It's not a huge investment in time, but it'll email you as frequently as you want. You can have it set up to email you as soon as a listing that meets your criteria pops up. You can have it send you a daily summary, or you can have it send you weekly. I think there's even a monthly option. So you can set this up to work however you want. Now, one thing, and here's the other thing, this is also a great way to filter out agents you're not likely to want to work with. You're looking to establish a relationship with an agent, and if you tell them what you're up to and are honest about it and let them know this could be a long haul process, if they're enthusiastic about it and say, yeah, let's do it, let's get you set up, and they're out there keeping an eye out for you, that's great. That's an encouraging sign. Lots of agents, who tend to be the majority of agents, and very often the ones that do the most deals in an area, tend to be puppy mill style real estate agents, where they just pump you through the process. They don't want a lot of investment in time. They are strictly going to go for the easiest fruit, and you as an investor don't tend to be. And they don't want to have to worry about keeping track of it. Remember, they're trying to get all those escrows they can close per year, and not really actually pay much attention to the folks that they're closing those escrows for. You need to be diligent. You need to be persistent. So you need to set aside time, and what better time to download Google Calendars and set down as one of your scheduled goal things to review all the listings that have popped up on your search. That's a great way to go. It's a great way to use it. And as you schedule things that conflict with it, it just moves it within your day to another time that is open. So it's a great way to stay on task. Now, one thing to remember in all of these things, and it's something I think that kills an awful lot of investors, And everyone has their threshold. The truth is, I have my threshold. I think I've told the story where when I used to live up in Auburn, California, I was doing a lot of pre-foreclosure work. So I would go to the county records and look for folks who had gotten their first notice of foreclosure. And I would reach out to them to say, let's figure out a way to get you out of this. And I bought the whole idea of or the mindset of, I'm helping these people get out from under a horrible debt. That is not the way most people see it. And you end up seeing people in these horrible situations, and it starts to weigh on you a little bit. And I ended up backing away from being as aggressive on that and pursuing that. The stress of it was nuts. I found myself sincerely wanting to help them get past their problem, and trying to give them advice to solve the problem, where my vested interest personally, and it was to not solve their problem, was for me to acquire their property. And so that conflict was not lost on me. And eventually I kind of stepped away from, and I would leave them with, listen, I want to make this easier for you. Here's what I can do for you. If the circumstance comes up and you decide this is the way you want to go, let me know. So that's, I stopped being neck deep in the whole pre-foreclosure marketplace and kind of just went to ankle deep and just would go in there and say, hey, I understand this is a tough time. I don't want to make it more stressful for you. Here's what I can do. If this will help you, let me know. Anyway, so develop a thick skin is where we're getting at here. Now, in this case, my example, I think, is a little bit different from what you're going to get. You're going to get people who might be angry at you, because one truth that's going to come from this is you're going to try and, obviously, because you're trying to be the buyer here, is get a low ball offer. Some of the responses you're going to get are going to be just exceedingly nasty. And here's the other thing. You may even come up with what you think is actually a pretty generous offer and very positive for that seller, and they'll still be super nasty at you. If there's one thing I've learned from doing this show, no matter how innocuous a topic might be, or how innocent or not controversial something I say might be, there's no shortage of folks out there that are going to want to rip out my esophagus because I've said it. If you'd like an example of that, there's actually a couple of videos, a couple of the shows that have posted to YouTube where there's a very interesting fella who is convinced that I am the spawn of Satan in the world of real estate. So that was fun. At some point, I gave up on rational discourse and just decided to ride the wave of crazy and see where it went. But I know a few of you have reached out to me in the audience to say, what the heck's going on with that guy? But yeah, there's. And even if you sincerely are thinking you're doing a good thing for somebody, don't assume that doesn't mean you're going to get someone saying nasty stuff to you. So just get to a point where that stuff washes off your back, and don't take it to heart, because odds are it's not true anyway. So only you'll know for sure. All right, folks, that's about it for today. I'm very confident I'll actually click the right button today, and you'll actually see this show up at the right time on Thursday. If not, I'll owe somebody something. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.